On the morning they announced the company's most profitable quarter in 15 years, my boss handed me a gift that made my stomach turn. Not because it was offensive, because it was honest. "Huge year," Daniel Mercer said, dropping a shrink-wrapped desk calendar onto my workstation like he was delivering junk mail. "Figured you'd need this to track all those late nights you've been pulling." The plastic crinkled under the fluorescent lights. The cover showed a generic sunset over mountains with the kind of inspirational quote you'd find on a motivational poster in a dentist's office. Inside the front cover, scrawled in black Sharpie, were 4 words. "Keep crushing it, Daniel." No mention of the numbers we just celebrated. No acknowledgement of the client contracts I'd personally salvaged. No bonus, no raise, no equity. Just a calendar that still had the clearance sticker partially peeled off the back. I turned it over slowly while he stood there, arms crossed, waiting for the reaction he'd scripted in his head. A laugh maybe. Some performative gratitude about how thoughtful he was. A self-deprecating joke about needing all the help I could get staying organized. Instead, I looked up at him and said, "Thanks." Flat. No inflection. Just acknowledgement. He smirked, gave my shoulder a patronizing squeeze, and walked back toward the glass-walled offices at the far end of the floor where this quarter's profits were already being converted into executive stock options, performance bonuses, and a brand new fleet lease program that somehow never applied to anyone below director level. I sat there staring at that calendar for a long time. On the cover, beneath the sunset photo, our company logo gleamed in embossed silver foil. Below that, in smaller print, "Celebrating excellence together." That word. Together. I slipped the calendar into my bag when I left that evening. Not because I planned to use it. Because I knew exactly where it was going to end up the following morning. The next day I arrived at the office before dawn. The executive floor was silent. Glass doors locked, reception desk empty, the leather couches in the waiting area still perfectly arranged. I swiped my security badge, walked past the framed magazine covers featuring our CEO, past the digital display cycling through revenue charts and growth projections. Outside the CEO's office, his assistant's chair sat vacant. But his door was open. Just a crack. Maybe 3 inches. The light inside glowed warm against the dark hallway. He was already in there. I didn't knock. I didn't announce myself. I walked up to his desk, a massive slab of walnut positioned to face the doorway like a judge's bench, and placed the calendar directly in the center of his leather desk pad. I opened it to January. On the left side, the standard grid of days. On the right, a blank page meant for notes. On that blank page, I had written 3 numbers in careful black ink, copied directly from yesterday's all-hands presentation. Quarterly revenue, $287 million. Net profit, $94 million. My bonus, $0. Underneath, I added 1 sentence. This is what celebrating excellence together looks like this year. No signature. No name. Just the company logo on the cover and those numbers staring back from the page. I closed the door to the same 3-inch gap and walked back downstairs like it was any other Thursday. The next morning, Daniel strolled over to my desk with his usual coffee cup and that permanent half-smile that made every sentence sound like a setup for a punchline. He leaned against the partition between our desks, loud enough for half the floor to hear. "So," he said, drawing out the word. "You using your calendar?" I looked up from my monitor, let a beat pass and smiled back. "No," I said. "I left it on Mr. Whitman's desk." He snorted. "You mean the CEO? Why would you?" "With our profit numbers written inside," I finished. The smirk slid off his face like someone had wiped it away with a towel. He froze mid-sip. Every conversation within a 10-foot radius went quiet. "You did what?" he asked, voice cracking just enough to give him away. "I put it right in the middle of his desk," I said calmly. "Open to January. Our record revenue, our record profit, and my share of it written underneath your message about crushing it." He stared at me like I'd just told him I'd set his car on fire. Then he said it louder than he meant to. "Why would you do that?" And that was the moment I knew a $6 desk calendar was about to cost him a whole lot more than he'd bargained for. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me back up and explain how it got to this point. How a cheap piece of cardboard and paper became the most expensive thing he'd handed anyone all year. Before I do, drop a comment and tell me this. Have you ever received a thank you from work that felt more like an insult than appreciation? And if you like stories where quiet people stop playing along and make the right eyes see what's really happening, hit subscribe so you don't miss what comes next. My name is Brinley Foster. I'm 38 years old, and until a few months ago, I was a senior operations analyst at a company called Edge Dynamics. If you've worked in consulting or enterprise software long enough, you've probably seen a version of us. We weren't a scrappy startup anymore, but we weren't a faceless conglomerate either. We were in that awkward middle stage. Too large for everyone to know everyone's name. Small enough that one botched client delivery could still put half the company into crisis mode for 2 weeks straight. When I joined Edge Dynamics 12 years ago, we were 40 people working out of a renovated factory building with exposed ductwork, unreliable heat, and a ping-pong table someone kept insisting was essential for team morale. We shipped client solutions on Sunday nights. We broke things, fixed them at 3 in the morning, and ordered takeout instead of filing incident reports. Recognition was straightforward back then. Something worked, you got to sleep. If it didn't, you stayed awake until it did. Nobody talked about employee engagement scores. Nobody sent out quarterly sentiment surveys. We were underpaid, overworked, and at least we were honest about it. That started changing around year 6. We landed a Fortune 500 client, then another. Venture capital arrived. The factory got drywall, swipe card access, and a polished granite logo in the lobby. The founders, who used to sit 5 feet away in sneakers and faded jeans, started wearing tailored suits and spending more time in glass-walled conference rooms than at their desks. Human resources appeared as an actual department, not just one overwhelmed person juggling payroll and benefits. They started using phrases like retention strategies and recognition frameworks, which is corporate speak for we'd like to appear as though we care, but not enough to actually spend real money on it. And that's when Daniel Mercer entered the picture. On paper, Daniel was perfect middle management material. Bachelor's degree in business administration, 7 years at a larger firm, comfortable presenting to executives, could say strategic alignment, deliverables, and synergy in the same sentence without flinching. He arrived in pressed khakis and a practiced smile, shook everyone's hand, told us he was excited to learn from the people doing the real work. Within 4 months, he'd figured out how Edge Dynamics actually operated. People like me made things happen. People like him took credit for it. He'd wander into team meetings 15 minutes late, skim through project dashboards for 5 minutes, then repeat something I'd explained half an hour earlier. Only louder. With more confident hand gestures. Leadership ate it up. He's really taking ownership, they'd say. I didn't hate him. I just didn't respect him. We existed on different planes. I was there to keep projects from imploding. He was there to make slides explaining how we'd kept projects from imploding. For a long time that division worked fine. I understood my role. He understood how to look like he understood his. Then Edge Dynamics decided we needed a culture of appreciation. The recognition program launched on a wave of corporate enthusiasm. HR sent a beautifully designed email with stock photos of smiling employees opening boxes. Subject line: Honoring your journey, new milestone recognition program. The email talked about celebrating service anniversaries, about thoughtfully curated gifts matched to your impact, about ensuring every year of dedication is acknowledged and valued. They showed sample items during the next company-wide meeting. Engraved pens, noise-canceling headphones, custom fleece jackets with your name embroidered on the chest. People applauded. Someone joked, maybe sticking around actually pays off now. I was 9 years in at that point. No plaques, no certificates, no complaints. I wasn't there for swag. But I won't pretend that when they described the 10-year package, something meaningful to honor a decade of building Edge Dynamics, I didn't think that might be nice. I hit my 10-year mark in June. I received a templated email from HR. Congratulations on reaching your 10-year anniversary. We couldn't do this without dedicated people like you. There was a clip art cake in the body of the message. No gift. No mention in the company meeting. No jacket, no pen, nothing. I shrugged it off. We'd just come off a brutal client implementation. I assumed the program was rolling out in phases or my name was stuck in some approval queue. I was too exhausted to chase after a token gift. Then the fourth quarter numbers came in and the profit announcement hit. You can always tell when a company's had a strong financial year. Small signs appear first. Catered lunches become slightly fancier. The coffee in the break room upgrades from generic to branded. Mysterious construction noise starts happening on the executive floor. Then there are the unmistakable signs. At Edge Dynamics, it was the quarterly all-hands presentation. Our CEO, a man named Jameson Blake, stood on the small stage in the main conference hall wearing his trademark navy blazer and no tie. He clicked to the Q4 results slide with visible satisfaction. The numbers were staggering compared to where we'd started. Revenue up 41%, net profit up 58%, best quarter in company history. "We did this together," he said, beaming at the crowd. "Every single one of you made this possible." People clapped. A few whistled. Someone in the back shouted something congratulatory. The slide that followed was considerably less celebratory. Cash bonuses, deferred to Q2 pending board review. Jameson launched into a speech we'd heard variations of before. Reinvesting in infrastructure. Positioning for sustainable growth. Compensation isn't just about immediate financial reward. It's about building a workplace you're proud to be part of. I watched the faces around me. Some looked disappointed. Most just looked resigned. Bonuses had been deferred 4 years running. But this time felt different. We weren't barely scraping by anymore. We were breaking records. No bonuses. No raises outside the standard annual cycle. But we did get an email that afternoon. Holiday appreciation gifts will be distributed to all team members this week. A small gesture of our gratitude. That small gesture was waiting on my desk the next morning. Except it wasn't small. Not in what it represented. The calendar arrived in a thin cardboard sleeve with the Edge Dynamics logo printed on the front. There was a sticky note on top with my name in Daniel's messy handwriting. "Enjoy." Inside the front cover, on the glossy white page where you'd normally find a printed greeting, he'd written in thick black marker. "Keep crushing it, Daniel." No mention of my years with the company. No mention of the 3 major client accounts I'd personally kept from collapsing during their most critical phases. Just a throwaway phrase he'd probably picked up from some leadership podcast, scrawled in marker like he'd fulfilled his obligation and could move on. Around me, my teammates were opening identical sleeves. Same calendars. Different variations of the same casual message. "Don't forget to pencil in some rest. Here's to another big year." Time flies when you're winning. A few people chuckled. A few rolled their eyes. Most quietly slid theirs into desk drawers and went back to work. I flipped mine over. On the back, in tiny print, was the manufacturer's information and a product code. I opened my browser and typed it in. Retail price, $8.99. Bulk corporate pricing, $5.75. Per unit. My eyes drifted to the monitor mounted on the wall across the floor, still cycling through yesterday's presentation slides. Net profit, $94 million. $8.99. I could have let it go. Everyone around me seemed to. But something about the gap between that number on the screen and the cheapness in my hands pulled at a thread that had been unraveling for years. I opened our internal finance portal. My access wasn't anything special. Senior analysts could view certain budget categories to understand project costs and resource allocation. I navigated to the employee program's expense code. The one I'd noticed when the recognition program first launched. There was Employee Recognition and Milestones Annual Budget, $145,000. Below that, a vendor line item. Prestige Corporate Solutions Q4 Invoice, $38,600. Description: Premium Executive Calendars and Holiday Appreciation Packages. Premium. 38,600 divided by the number of employees we had, plus the sample units they always ordered for approval and photography. The math didn't come close to adding up. Someone was billing us for premium and delivering bargain bin. And I knew exactly who'd championed the Prestige Corporate Solutions vendor proposal during last year's leadership retreat as a cost-effective solution to outsource employee appreciation. Daniel Mercer. I didn't do anything dramatic that day. I didn't print the invoice and march into his office waving it around. I didn't post about it on the company forum or send a mass email. I went home. I sat at my kitchen table with the calendar, my laptop, and those quarterly numbers still echoing in my head. My partner, Elliot, came in halfway through my clicking and cross-referencing. "What are you doing?" he asked. "Trying to figure out how much my keep crushing it actually cost," I said. He raised an eyebrow. Do I want to know? $8.99, I said. Maybe less in bulk. During what was apparently our most profitable quarter ever. He watched my face. You're not upset about the calendar itself, he said. No, I replied. I'm upset about what it says without saying it. And I'm curious where the rest of that $38,000 went. He didn't tell me to drop it. He just said, if you pull that thread, be ready for whatever unravels with it. I pulled it anyway. Because there's a point where frustration becomes clarity. And once you see it clearly, you can't unsee it. The next day was another company-wide meeting. This one was framed as a celebration of our record quarter. There were pastries in the lobby. Someone had ordered balloons shaped like dollar signs. Jameson ran through the same slides, the same talking points about resilience and teamwork. Near the end, he transitioned to culture and recognition. He clicked to a slide featuring happy stock photo employees high-fiving around a conference table. We know financial compensation matters, he said. But we also know appreciation is about more than numbers on a paycheck. It's about feeling seen and valued. That's why we've invested more than ever in our recognition program this year. I raised my hand. The person managing the mic hesitated. When they didn't move, I stood up. Question from the floor, I said clearly. Jameson paused. He prided himself on accessibility. He nodded to the AV coordinator. A wireless mic made its way to me. I have a question about the recognition budget, I said. Specifically about how it translates into what we actually receive. He smiled. Of course, he said. We put considerable thought into that program. I'm happy to discuss it. I walked down the aisle with the calendar tucked under my arm. This wasn't theater. This was documentation. I've been here 12 years, I said. This is what I received to mark our best quarter in company history and my 10th and 11th anniversaries. I handed the calendar to the CFO, a woman named Alara Vaughn, sitting in the front row. She took it, surprised, and opened it. The cheap cover. The marker scrawl. The blank monthly grids. I kept my voice conversational. I looked up the product code, I said. It retails for about $9. But the invoice we paid to the vendor that provided these was $38,600. For premium executive calendars and holiday appreciation packages. A murmur spread through the room like a wave. I didn't accuse anyone of theft. I didn't point at Daniel. I just asked the question the numbers demanded. So my question is, when we say we're investing in appreciation, is this the outcome you intended? Jameson's expression did something I'd never seen before. The polished smile flickered. Just for a second. Then he caught it. Thank you for bringing this to our attention, he said carefully. We take how we recognize our people very seriously. We'll review those details and follow up appropriately. He moved on to the next agenda item. The meeting ended. People filtered back to their desks, buzzing in a way free pastries don't cause. I went back to my workstation. Not because I thought that one moment would fix everything. Because I suspected the calendar wasn't the only thing that didn't add up. Which brings us back to that moment with Daniel at my desk. He'd been sitting 3 rows back during the all-hands meeting, arms folded tight across his chest like he was holding something in. Maybe panic, maybe rage. His jaw was clenched so hard I could see the muscle twitch under his skin. His eyes never left Alara Vaughn's hands as she turned the calendar over, her manicured fingers tracing the flimsy cover, the sharpest scrawl, the empty grids where no one had ever written a single meaningful appointment. To him, that object wasn't paper and plastic. It was a live explosive ticking down in silence. Now, less than 24 hours later, he stood at the edge of my desk, trying to stitch his authority back together with forced nonchalance and that same smirk he'd worn for years like armor. So, he said, leaning against the partition with theatrical ease, you using your calendar? The question was bait. He wanted me flustered. He wanted me to smile, to laugh it off, to say something small and safe that would let him walk away feeling like he'd reasserted control. But I'd crossed a line the moment I placed that calendar on Jameson Blake's desk. Not out of spite, but out of exhaustion. Out of the quiet fury that builds when you realize you've been complicit in your own invisibility. No, I said, meeting his eyes without blinking. I left it on Mr. Whitman's desk. With our profit numbers written inside. The smirk didn't just fade, it evaporated. His pupils dilated. His throat bobbed as he swallowed hard, and when he spoke again, his voice cracked on the first syllable. Why would you do that? He wasn't asking why. He already knew. He knew exactly how it would look. The CEO, fresh off a speech about shared success and meaningful appreciation, walking into his sunlit office to find a clearance bin calendar sitting dead center on his walnut desk. On the right-hand page, 3 lines in neat, unemotional script. Quarterly revenue, $287 million. Net profit, $94 million. My bonus, $0. Beneath it, a single sentence. This is what celebrating excellence together looks like this year. No name. No finger pointing. Just arithmetic. And that was the genius of it, the horror of it for him. Truth doesn't need a signature. It needs to be seen. I didn't write your name on it, I said softly. I didn't need to. For a heartbeat he looked like he might say something incisive, something cutting, maybe try to shame me for overreacting, for being dramatic. But the words died in his mouth. He opened it, then closed it, as if realizing that any defense would only confirm what the numbers already implied. Instead he turned on his heel and walked, too fast, too stiff, toward the elevators, his polished shoes clicking like a countdown. The next 72 hours unfolded like a slow-motion audit of consequence. He could feel the air change. Not with shouting or panic, but with the quiet tightening of protocols, the subtle realignment of power. It was like watching a storm gather on the horizon. You couldn't see the wind, but you felt the pressure drop in your chest. First, the finance portal updated overnight. The expense code for Prestige Corporate Solutions, once accessible to senior analysts for budget transparency, now displayed a stark red banner. Access restricted, under review. No explanation. Just a digital door slamming shut. Second, Elara Vaughn started appearing on the 3rd floor. Not in passing, not for a quick coffee run. She moved with purpose, tablet in hand, exchanging hushed words with HR near the break room. Her usual calm was replaced by something sharper. A laser focus that said this wasn't about a misordered gift. This was forensic. Third, the email arrived at 7:03 a.m. on the second morning. Subject: Recognition Program Internal Audit Attendees. CFO, Director of HR, Compliance Officer Optional, Brinley Foster. So, as if they didn't already know I was the reason the meeting existed. I clicked accept without hesitation. This wasn't about being invited. It was about being witnessed. The conference room, Sterling 3, was bathed in the flat, neutral light of institutional scrutiny. Daniel was already there, sitting at the far end of the table like he was trying to put physical distance between himself and the truth. Without an audience, without slides or scripted talking points, he looked smaller. Friendlier. His usual confidence had been replaced by a nervous energy that made him tap his pen against his notepad like a metronome counting down his own undoing. Elara sat at the head, posture perfect, expression unreadable. Veronica Lang from HR wore her professional neutrality like a mask. Eyes soft, voice measured, but posture rigid with anticipation. Kenneth Oakes, compliance, looked exactly as he did in our annual ethics videos. Mid-50s, salt and pepper hair, wire-rimmed glasses. Except now he wasn't reading from a script. He was holding real documents. A finance analyst I'd never seen before sat near the wall, fingers resting on a keyboard, a stack of printed pages beside her like evidence at a trial. Brinley, thank you for joining us, Elara said, her voice warm but precise. Of course, I replied, pulling out a chair. Daniel forced a laugh, too quick, too high. Yeah, we're just clearing up some confusion about vendor substitutions, he said, waving a hand like it was a minor clerical hiccup. Holiday rush, things get mixed up. Before I could respond, the analyst slid a manila folder to the center of the table. On top, the Q4 invoice from Prestige Corporate Solutions. Premium Executive Desk Calendar and Holiday Appreciation Package 120 units at $321.67. Per package total, $38,600. Beneath it, encased in a clear plastic sleeve, my packing slip. Same PO number. Same delivery date. Description: Standard Desk Calendar, Model DC402 Retail. $8.99. Miss Foster, Kenneth said, turning to me, can you confirm this is what you received? Yes, I said. That's the model number. That's the item. And that's Daniel's note inside. Keep crushing it, Daniel. Veronica placed another sheet on the table. This is the vendor approval form for Prestige Corporate Solutions, she said. Signed off by you, Daniel. You also authored the business case for increasing the recognition budget from $75,000 to $145,000 over the past 3 years. Correct. Right, he said, voice tight. We needed to scale the program. More employees, bigger company. Prestige offered a full-service package. Warehousing, fulfillment, customization. There was no customization, I said quietly. He shot me a look, sharp, almost pleading, but I held his gaze. He turned back to the table. I mean, generally speaking, he snapped. You got yours, right? What happened was a vendor error. It happens. We'll get a credit. No harm done. Kenneth didn't flinch. He pulled another page from his file. This isn't an isolated incident, he said. We cross-referenced 12 quarters of invoices against employee reports, exit interviews, and delivery confirmations. The pattern is consistent. Premium packages billed, significantly cheaper items delivered. In some cases, like Q2 of last year, nothing was delivered at all. Ilara folded her hands on the table. And all of those invoices were approved by you, she said. With no documented complaints to the vendor. No credit memos. No follow-up. Daniel laughed. Too loud this time, the sound bouncing off the glass walls like a desperate echo. Are we seriously doing this over a calendar? He asked, voice rising. You're going to blow this up because one employee got precious about a stocking stuffer? Ilara didn't raise her voice. He didn't need to. This isn't about a calendar, she said, each word landing like a stone. This is about $273,000 in company funds over 4 years, with no clear justification. And a vendor registered to a residential address that appears to be connected to your family. Silence. Thick. Absolute. The analyst clicked a key. A screen on the wall lit up with 2 columns. Prestige Corporate Solutions Business Registration Address. 1847 Riverside Drive, Unit 4B. Daniel Mercer, Emergency Contact, HR File. Brother. Ethan Mercer, 1847 Riverside Drive, Unit 4B. Same address. Same unit. Same last name. Care to explain that connection? Kenneth asked. Daniel opened his mouth. Closed it. Then, his face twisting in betrayal, he turned to me. This is your fault, he hissed. You think they actually care about you? You're just a name in a spreadsheet. I'm the one who brought in. Daniel, Ilara cut in, voice like steel wrapped in velvet. I'm going to stop you there. Right now we're establishing facts. HR will schedule a separate conversation with you. The meeting stretched another 40 minutes. Questions about timelines, delivery logs, system access. I answered plainly. No embellishment. No anger. Just facts lined up like dominoes. Because that's what this was. Not a personal vendetta, but a structural failure laid bare by a single deliberate act of visibility. When I left, Daniel remained, trapped in the room with the evidence, the witnesses, the unraveling of a scheme built on the assumption that no one would notice or care or dare to speak. Back at my desk, the office felt different. Not louder or quieter, just charged like the air before lightning strikes. No one said a word. But eyes met mine a little longer. Shoulders straightened. A junior analyst gave me a small, solemn nod. Something had fractured. Not just Daniel's career, but the illusion that performative appreciation could stand in for real value. And for the first time in years, I didn't feel invisible. I felt seen. Some people imagine justice as dramatic. Loud confrontations, public scenes, immediate consequences. They picture righteous speeches in boardrooms, mic drops in all-hands meetings, or viral whistleblower videos that force a CEO to resign by lunchtime. But in real life, especially in places that pride themselves on process and maturity, justice is rarely theatrical. It's methodical. It's administrative. It's a series of checkboxes in a compliance portal, an access revocation at 2 a.m., a vendor contract terminated without fanfare. The week after the meeting where I presented the calendar and its dissonant numbers, the changes began not with a bang, but with a series of quiet deletions. First, Daniel's name vanished from the procurement approval workflow. Not with an announcement, not with a reassignment, just gone. One day his digital signature was required for anything over $5,000. The next, the drop-down menu in the system didn't include him. Then his name disappeared from the weekly leadership sync calendar. Not removed due to schedule conflict, not on PTO. Just absent as if he'd never been there. By Thursday his profile was scrubbed from the intranet org chart. No replacement listed. No interim lead named. Just a blank space where Director of Operational Enablement used to be. He still came in. Same khakis. Same half-smile. Same habit of leaning against cubicle partitions while paraphrasing other people's work as if it were insight. But the energy around him had shifted. People didn't avoid him, they just didn't include him. Emails that once CC'd him now stopped short. Meeting invites excluded him without comment. When he spoke in team huddles, colleagues would nod politely, say, "Good point, Dan," and then proceed exactly as they had before he opened his mouth. It wasn't malice. It was institutional triage. The system had already diagnosed him as non-essential. That's the thing about corporate ecosystems. They don't wait for HR to catch up. They sense weakness, fraud, or irrelevance long before the paperwork arrives. And once the scent is in the air, loyalty evaporates like morning dew. 4 days after the audit meeting, the invisible became visible. I was in the lobby, waiting for my morning coffee from the overpriced machine that suddenly seemed more tolerable now that bonus deferrals were under scrutiny. Through the glass doors I saw Daniel stride in at 9:15 a.m. Right on schedule, right on brand. He swiped his badge at the turnstile. Red light. He paused, frowned, swiped again. Red again. For a moment he just stood there, blinking at the reader like it had betrayed him personally. Then the security guard, Mark, who'd worked there since the factory days and knew every employee by first name, stepped out from behind the desk. "Daniel," Mark said, voice low but firm. "Can you come with me for a moment?" No escalation. No confrontation. Just a quiet escort down the hall to conference room B. The one with no windows, used for exit interviews and disciplinary conversations. Inside, an HR representative sat with a folded cardboard box on the table. Already open. Already labeled with his name in neat block letters. 20 minutes later, Daniel walked back through the lobby. Box in his arms. Tie slightly crooked. Face expressionless, as if he'd already rehearsed this walk 100 times in his head. No one said goodbye. Not out of cruelty, just because there was nothing left to say. The betrayal wasn't personal, it was financial. And in a company that just posted $94 million in profit, financial betrayal is the only kind that gets punished swiftly. By the time I returned to my desk, the email had hit every inbox. Subject: Personnel update effective immediately. Daniel Mercer is no longer with Edge Dynamics. We thank him for his contributions and wish him well in his future endeavors. No explanation. They never provide explanations. Liability avoidance 101. But inside the company people understood. The numbers had spoken. And unlike inspirational quotes on cheap calendars, numbers don't lie, they compound. 2 things happened after that. First, the recognition program changed overnight. Prestige Corporate Solutions vanished from the approved vendor list as if it had never existed. In its place appeared a new budget line. Direct Employee Awards, Internal Administration. No external vendor. No premium packages. Just a transparent, internally managed fund where milestone anniversaries, project completions and peer-nominated acknowledgements would be processed by HR and finance jointly, with receipts, with approval trails, with actual accountability. 3 weeks later, Veronica Lang, the director of HR, called me into a meeting. She sat across from me in a small glass room on the 3rd floor. No whiteboards, no posters about core values, just 2 chairs and a table. She looked tired. Not the performative exhaustion of leadership offsites, but the real kind, the kind that comes from realizing your culture of appreciation was a laundering scheme for nepotism. "I'm not going to pretend we handled this well," she said, sliding a folder across the table. "You shouldn't have had to leave a calendar on the CEO's desk to get our attention." Inside wasn't merch. Not a fleece jacket, not a pen, not even a gift card. It was a printed compensation adjustment letter. Back pay for all milestone awards I should have received over the past 4 years, including my 10 and 11-year anniversaries, calculated at the originally approved program rates. A base salary increase retroactive to the start of the fiscal year, aligning me with market benchmarks for my role, experience, and impact. And a one-time payment labeled Adjustment, systemic recognition gap. This isn't severance, she clarified. Accepting this doesn't obligate you to stay. You're underpaid relative to market. This is us correcting part of that. I looked at the numbers. They weren't generous. They were just correct. Not a reward. A restoration. Like returning a borrowed book you'd long assumed was lost. I signed. Not because it healed the years of erasure. Not because it erased the memory of that $6 calendar. But because that money had always been mine. And integrity sometimes means accepting what's owed, not as a gift but as a reckoning. The second thing happened the next day. Jameson Blake asked to see me. In 12 years at Edge Dynamics, I'd been in his office 3 times. Once to fix a frozen projector before a client demo. Once when my team got a group commendation for salvaging a failing deployment. He shook my hand and said, "Teamwork makes the dream work," which I've never forgiven him for. This time he closed the door. "I don't enjoy being called out in front of the entire company," he said without preamble. "I didn't enjoy what the numbers revealed," I replied. He nodded slowly. "Fair," he said. "You embarrassed me. And you were right." He gestured to his desk. The calendar was still there. Open to January, my handwriting stark against the blank notes page. Revenue. Profit. $0. "So here's my question," he said, leaning forward. "Does fixing the program and adjusting your compensation fix this for you?" It was the kind of question that pretends to be about you. Really, it's about him gauging risk. Assessing whether I'd go public, whether I'd sue, whether I'd poison morale on the way out. I answered honestly anyway. "It fixes the immediate numbers," I said. "It doesn't change the fact that it took a public stunt for you to examine the invoices you'd been approving for years." He leaned back. "You planning to leave?" "Yes," I said. "Not today. Not next week. I'll finish the client engagement we're in the middle of. I won't leave my team stranded. But I'm not going to build another decade of my career in a place that only checks whether the message matches the math when someone forces them to look." He didn't argue. He just nodded once. Then, almost as an afterthought, "I'd appreciate it if you'd document everything you found. So we can ensure this doesn't happen again." "I already did," I said. "It's in the shared drive under recognition audit findings." He smirked faintly. "Of course it is." We shook hands. Not hostile. Not warm. Just an acknowledgement that our paths had diverged. One toward repair, the other toward departure. 4 months later, I submitted my resignation. 2 weeks' notice. Detailed transition documentation. No drama. My next role was at a smaller firm. One where questions about financial transparency were treated with the same seriousness as questions about system uptime or data encryption. Where "we're like family" didn't mean "we'll exploit your loyalty." On my last day, I packed up my desk. A few teammates stopped by. One junior analyst lingered after the others left. "Thank you for what you did," she said quietly. I shrugged. "Anyone with system access could have seen it." "Yeah," she replied. "But you're the one who didn't pretend not to." That hit harder than any bonus ever could. Before I left, I stopped by reception. I handed the front desk coordinator a small package. Plain brown paper, no logo. Addressed to Jameson Blake. Inside was a proper calendar. Heavy stock paper. Elegant typography. No sunset photos. No corporate slogans. Just clean grids, quiet space, room for real planning. On the first page, under the blank year header, I'd written in black ink. "Appreciation costs more than $8.99. So does losing the people who make your record quarters possible." I didn't wait to see if he opened it. I walked out into the parking lot, the cold morning air sharp against my face, and realized I was for the first time in years not angry. Just clear. The calendar had never been the insult. It had been the translator. It took everything they'd been wordlessly telling me for years, about what my time was worth, about how seriously they took the word "together," and converted it into cardboard and ink where I couldn't ignore it anymore. They thought they were giving me a place to write appointments. What they actually gave me was a line in the sand. And I used it. If you've ever been handed a "thank you" that told you exactly how little they think you matter, remember this. You don't have to throw it back. You can place it down in the right spot, in front of the right eyes, and let it speak for you when you're too exhausted to keep explaining. Then you get to decide what happens next. Thanks for listening. I'll see you in the next one.